I was sitting down with the project engineers, and in comes Sergey Brin, the creator for Google. And he was saying, I really want to be able to launch this project. What do you bring to the table? And the production manager said, well, I've gathered together the best minds. Here's the stunt guy. He's done a ton of stuff with James Bond, with, Indiana Jones. I've got this gentleman here. Any problem you have, he can kind of figure it out. And then we kind of went through all the descriptions, and then Sergey came back sheerly in a brief passing, and he kind of touched me on the shoulder, and he's like, "Are you a crisis manager?" And I'm like, What is a crisis manager? He's like, "I'm about to go into crisis, and you're managing my concerns." I'm like, I love that title. Yeah. So I just incorporated into it, and it's made great sense for me. So I appreciate the fact that you liked it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to steal that from you for sure.
Please. Plagiarism is the best compliment. Hi, my name is James Lin, and I'm a location manager based out of Los Angeles. I've been working here for 20 years. I just wanted to say...
Locations, go to 2.
Is that me calling for me? I think they're calling my name, so I just wanted to say thank you to Locations on 2.
And this is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2, a podcast about location management for film, television, and commercial projects being produced around the world. Locations on 2 is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. The LMGI is a global organization of career location professionals working in the commercial, television, and film industry. Find out more by visiting them online at locationmanagers.org. My guest on this episode is Vice President of Physical Production at Universal Pictures, James Lin. James is a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and has a 25-year career as a location manager. During that time, he was a collaborator on such projects as Twilight, Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, Captain America Civil War and Winter Soldier, and the soon-to-be-released Wonder Woman 1984. Let's join James on the back channel where the work gets done, Locations on 2. Well, hey, James, thanks again for making time to join me on the podcast today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So, you have been a location manager for 27 years, 25 years, something like that.
Yeah, about more like 25. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what your interests were before you started doing this.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Orange County and worked at my parents' photo lab for many years during my preteens up through high school. And working at the photo lab helped me figure out what I really liked to do. And I have to say that seeing a lot of photographers coming into my mom and dad's shop really gave me a new outlook on life, as opposed to being an engineer, being a doctor, those professional careers, shall we say. And it really kind of piqued my interest when I saw photographers come in, bring their stuff that they would shoot. I would talk to them. And through the years, as I started working up towards 18, I got enough courage to kind of ask them, hey, do you ever need an assistant? And finally, an opportunity came around, and was able to assist a photographer who worked at Road and Track. And he said, hey, when you finish college, come call me back and we'll see if you want to work. So I went off to college, studied landscape architecture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Graduated from UC Berkeley with a Bachelor of Arts in Science.
I was an architecture student at Georgia Tech.
Oh, there you go. There is that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I really thought I would, that the phase of being a camera assistant would pass, but, that bug kind of kept calling on me, especially when I needed to pay bills, because when a lot of the production companies found out that I was going to school up in Northern California, unbeknownst to me, that was the car capital car commercial capital for a lot of the West Coast agencies. So I then discovered Mount Tamalpais, a lot of the great downtown financial district of San Francisco, taking the BART across the bay, and then realized that there was this great texture that I had yet to discover. So I then started to explore the city more, both through scouting and on my personal quest, if you will. And I did basically subsidize my college career by scouting on weekends and during the summer for these car commercials. So,
well, I was going to ask what kind of stuff you were scouting for, and the photographers that were hiring you as a camera assistant. What type of photography was it?
It was mostly print. I mostly just did print photography as a location scout for about 4 years, while I was still going to school, because sometimes, the jobs that I would have in college never really panned out because I would work odd. And doing design studio, you often will have to burn the midnight candle to get your project done. So sometimes to burn off some steam, I would take the BART or whatever public transportation, get in the city, and the streets would be deserted because I had just finished the project, and would take photos and started to accumulate a mental library, at which point a lot of producers were saying, well, okay, can you take some photos? And I'm like, well, sure. What does a location folder look like? And they were like, well, you got to take these pictures with a disc camera or 110 camera. You got to tape them together. I'm like, wow, it's kind of like cut and paste. Who knew that my fourth grade skills would be applicable?
It's a craft project.
Yeah, it's a craft project. So fast forward to realizing that this could potentially be a revenue maker. I started, putting a little bit more attention into the various location scouting folders that I worked for Road and Track, for Car and Driver. I mostly worked for a photographer out of Orange County, but traveled a lot to the Bay Area and to the East Coast, worked for J. Walter Thompson, a lot of the big agencies. And primarily the focus was only on cars because, cars were just easy. I didn't have to deal with personality. The car would come down off the truck. You'd shoot it and you put it back on the truck. So
I don't want to back us up too much, but I am curious because I've never had a chance to talk to anybody that worked in a real photo lab back in the day.
Sure.
But did y'all have that photo, the folder of photos under the counter of things people shouldn't have brought in for processing?
That is, that may have happened.
Obviously, most people would think of something like 1 Hour Photo, the movie with Robin Williams, when they think of that.
They weren't so much like the 1 Hour Photo Robin Williams movie. They were more about, I think my father and mother both were Taiwanese, so they immigrated here, for graduate school. And early on, I think my father always said, look, we will do whatever we can to make an honest buck, but we will never do anything that our parents would be ashamed of.
Sure.
So I was very much early on at the age of 14 exposed to provocateur photos, let's put it that way. Things that would fall in line with, the 60s and the 70s lifestyle of Berkeley, like make love, not war. So that's about all I will cop to, if you will.
Yeah, it's one of those things you've heard about and you wonder about, and I've never had the chance to ask that question, so I appreciate it. Just curious what it would have been like to have that guy come in to pick up the envelope of 36 dupes of pictures he may not have.
Yeah, well, we did a lot of mail order stuff. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was thinking more along the lines of the 1 Hour Photo Lab where you drop everything off before it went to digital like it is.
No, we did the odd thing is we focused on the 1 Hour Photo. We did that for, we had a lot of clients like insurance investigators, people who did litigation, and they had to show what the results of their investigation proved. But on the same note, I think my father took out an ad once in a photography journal magazine, and we started to get like trickled, like one or two, those Jiffy rubber bubble envelopes, and then it just started pouring in, and I'm like, what is this? And thankfully, it was never like we would never process child pornography. My father was very much against it, but I think it fascinated him that, people would take explicit photos of themselves and send it to a place in the middle, like not even next door, like sending it across state borders, and then it would come back processed. Like, as you said, who has access to this? Well, obviously a 14-year-old Asian kid who's trying to make a couple extra bucks. He's looking at it, but yeah, they were very interesting. I mean, I saw some, like, the oddest things. I saw kids that were doing science projects on pictures of algae growing. I distinctly remember this. And they were 36 pictures of the same thing. And I asked the mom, like, hey, what are you doing? They're like, oh, they're close-ups of algae. And I'm like, oh my God, you know that they're all the same. They're like, no, they're different. And I'm like, okay, if you think so, But on the same note, it exposed me to the creative aspect where a lot of photographers started to inadvertently, subconsciously give me shooting techniques that I incorporate into my day-to-day life. For instance, one photographer who worked for Road and Track and is now he's a contributing editor, Road and Track, but he's also a commercial director at Radical Media. He would often shoot landscape photography with an open shutter of like a 15th of a second, a 10th of a second. And my mother, who, because she's an immigrant, she has never been exposed to these creative ideas. She came to me and she's like, I don't understand. These all blurry. And I'm like, Mom, I don't know. And she would say, she would then say, I'm going to tell them to save money, so I'm not going to print it. So that was the first time the photographer, I recall, got a little heated with my mother, and he explained to her, I'm an artist. This is what I do. And my mother then said, I'm a business owner and I'm trying to save you money. And then when they actually explained their points of view to each other, they came to a conclusion that they were both right, at which point my mother then told me, whatever this photographer, Jeff Swart, comes in, print everything. It doesn't matter if you can't even figure it out, just print it. So we were like, okay. So it was the birth of a great friendship, because since then, Jeff Swart and I have worked on various car commercials. I was trying to get him to direct this movie. Oh, forgot what was it? The Art of Racing in the Rain with Gar Stein, because he's also sponsored by Porsche. And I've kept in contact with him because when I was scouting for Hot Wheels, I was hoping that he would direct second unit. It's been a great business as well as friendship over the past 20 years. So it's been invaluable.
That's awesome. I didn't mean to take us down too much of a rabbit hole, but I had a feeling there was a good story in there.
Yeah.
I have to ask, too, what is crisis management for productions in the entertainment and tech sector? Is that like the best title for a location manager ever?
It took me a while to think about that title.
I found that on your resume. I said, and I read the description. I said, well, that's a location manager.
Right. That is absolutely correct. Ironically, I was doing I guess they call it a black ops project for Google when Google Glass was trying to launch. I guess it was like 10 or 12 years ago. And I was sitting down with the project engineers, and in comes Sergey Brin, the creator for Google.
Sure.
And he was saying, I really want to be able to launch this project. What do you bring to the table? And the production manager said, well, I've gathered together the best minds. Here's the stunt guy. He's done a ton of stuff with James Bond, with, Indiana Jones. I've got this gentleman here. Any problem you have, he can kind of figure it out. And then we kind of went through all the descriptions, and then Sergey came back sheerly in a brief passing, and he kind of touched me on the shoulder, and he's like, "Are you a crisis manager?" And I'm like, what is a crisis manager? He's like, "I'm about to go into crisis, and you're managing my concerns." I'm like, I love that title. So I just incorporated into it, and it's made great sense for me. So I appreciate the fact that you liked it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to steal that from you for sure.
Please, plagiarism is the best compliment. So.
One of the things I do ask people, because I think one of the things I talk about a lot is we're one of the many unsung heroes on a location, on a movie set or a film set or a television set, location managers. Most people, if you're in a social setting, somebody that knows you is bound to say, "Oh, Dodd works in the film industry," or "James works in the film industry." And they go, "Oh, really? What do you do?" And then you say location manager, and they look at you with this blank look and say, "What's that?" And so I always am curious how people explain the job of a location manager, someone that doesn't have any idea what we do. I mean, some of my family still doesn't know. Well, is that how you describe it when somebody asks?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when they ask me, "What do you actually do?" I often have to tell them that when the circus leaves the confines of the studio, the backlot, wherever we're based, and we take the circus on the road, from that moment on, everything is within the location manager's jurisdiction, in my opinion. From getting the permits, from getting the crew there on a timely fashion, getting them directions there. Back in the day when we have to do maps, now people just scan a QR code. Navigating the oftentimes confusing path between local jurisdictions, city, state, national. For instance, I'm sure that you filmed in DC as well as foreign countries where you step from the green belt to the street to the sidewalk, and you've now crossed 3 jurisdictions and have to include all 3 jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Having the patience, if you will, to discuss why the wants and needs of the creatives is totally out of the question when they say they want to fly a chopper firing machine guns at the White House. I condone it, but, I can't necessarily say I can help deliver that. So it's definitely a mixture of, the job description, the duties of a location manager. Oftentimes I correlate it to a production manager, but on location, full on production manager on location, because as you and I and the people who you've interviewed previous to me, we've all, I'm sure, talked about having to negotiate contracts, having to negotiate, sometimes irate neighbors because they were not included in conversations that got us to this point. And what I found most often than not is that if I have the time and I can take 5-10 minutes away from the chaos and actually stand in front of this person, this business owner, whoever it is, and listen to what their concerns are, 9 out of 10 times the situation is diffused because they primarily want to know why they are not being heard. Why are they not being heard? And if we can just reassure to them, there is some onus of, listen, I really do apologize that the information was not conveyed to you, but I am here now. Please tell me what your concerns are. We're going to address it. And honestly, that's all they really need, because a lot of times, before the big boom of productions were on every block and every corner you turn, you'd run into another production. People were fed up. And and since then, I think people have realized that having film production is an integral part of beautification of the neighborhood, of keeping good public relations between the community and productions on a balance. Having a lot of taxpayer money go into helping maintenance of local streets, local businesses, things of that nature, as well as employing quite a few individuals. I mean, in this present day, as I'm sure you're aware with COVID-19, a lot of our fellow brothers and sisters have been left unemployed because of the total full stop of work. And that is one of the challenging things that I've been broached upon now, which is trying to navigate what are the wants and needs of leadership compared to membership. So
it sounds like you jumped into location scouting, but that still has very little to do with landscape architecture. And that's one of the fun things that I've noticed is very few people that do what we do started out with a mission in their mind to get into the film industry.
Ironically, when I got into the film industry from studying landscape architecture, it was the sole purpose for me to demonstrate to my parents that I could actually make a living and not rely on what I went to school for. Because unfortunately, the time at which I graduated from school, it was a soft recession. And I was competing with, associates at various landscape architecture planning firms that had a family, had 2 kids. They were willing to cut their rate down. And the principal of the firm basically was saying, no, I got this kid out of college. He's willing to work dirt cheap. And I realized that, even then business was unfair and I had to find something that I really felt passionate about. And honestly, I got a great thrill just going out with the can, look for certain things somebody conceptualized on a piece of paper. Like they literally drew it and say, this is what I'm thinking. Being able to have that as an additional option gave me cause for, let's just try scouting. So, I tried scouting like for a full calendar year to see if I can make a living. And to my surprise, because I think of well-placed stepping stones that I'd laid prior to establishing relationships with various other photographers, and if you will, being still very young and hungry, I was able to work, over 200 days in a calendar year. It was all non-union. So they would call you, they would say, hey, you got this gig, are you available? And you do it. And it was amazing. And then I realized that I could then determine my own work schedule. Like I could work 200 days out of the year and then not work. But when you're young, you sometimes are like, I just want to keep working. So I did that. And the tools that I learned in landscape architecture, ironically, helped really shape my communication skills with the client, AKA the photographer. Because the photographer often would say, well, I'm looking for this certain house. And I would say, well, what color is it? And they'd say white. And I'd say, where is it on? And they would say East Coast. And I would say, like a New England clapboard, colonial. And they would say, well, what's that look like? And for us to be able to have that shorthand in communication with basically our boss and clearly arrive at the same conclusion, like, this is what we want. We want the white colonial house with black trim. You see all the time. They use the Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's in Pasadena. I want to put, whatever car, sedan in front. And then you're like, okay, I know where it is. I know where I can find it. As opposed to, well, it might be this, it might be Spanish tile, it might be whatever. When you can arrive at the same conclusion quicker, you then become more efficient and then can check the more boxes faster and then move on to the next task. So that's how I feel my college education was able to contribute to my now profession of a location scout and manager.
You started off, obviously, the location scouting is obviously a fun part of our job in that it's where we probably have the most creative collaboration, the opportunity to collaborate on the creative side of the project before it gets going. And it sounds like you really enjoyed that part, but at some point you made the jump to start dealing with the logistics once the creative part has moved forward? How did that happen?
From what I recall, I think it happened when a location manager on a commercial fell out and he had double booked himself, and he said, "Hey, do you want to take over this job?" And I said, honestly, I don't know what a location manager does. I just shoot pretty pictures. I wait for sunset or I get up at sunrise. And he said, "Oh, it's easy. I'll just give you a crash course." Well, that easy crash course was by no means what he described it. So after he did that, I realized, well, if I can expand my term of employment from not only working the front end as a scout, but potentially working the front scout, the middle as the manager, and the end as a cleanup, there is no room for interpretation between me handing it off to somebody and that location manager saying, "Oh no, this is what the previous person told me." Like, always stops with me. So I would try it. I tried it mostly on commercials first. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's fine. And then, my very first feature was a Paul Verhoeven movie called Starship Troopers. And that was a rude awakening of what features location management was. The supervisor at the time had basically said, "Look, I know you're an amazing scout. You obviously have a larger skill set than most people who come up through the ranks. So one, I'll get to the union, but you have to work location PA for 30 days. And that was really tough for me to swallow because location PA made like 1/4 of what I made as a scout. But I also said,
Sure.
You know what, try it. What is this thing that you call union benefits? Healthcare? What do I don't need that. But I stuck it out. Was really, really fortunate to get my 30 days. And, now it's unheard of, but I got all my 298 of 300 days required to work as an assistant location manager on one movie, then got it on the next show. So that's how I bridged going from scouting to management, mostly out of sheer need. But I will say that after that movie, I took kind of a hiatus from features and just with commercials because it was very, very grueling as a location assistant because I saw the inefficiencies of how productions were run, and I wanted to help them. And every time, at every turn that I had a suggestion on how to be, in my opinion, a young 22-year-old to be more efficient, it was met with, "Oh, come on, kid, you wait your turn." So I just said, "All right, I'll take a little break." But it didn't scorn me from coming back. Thankfully, I came back 2 years later, did a couple more features, started to get more experience under my belt, kind of swallowed the pride and realized that things are done for a reason. There's a chain of command. The things that we might see in the smaller commercial world where crews are 20 to 50 as opposed to features of, in upwards of 300 to 800 a day, was that everything comes in a certain pace. And you just have to be prepared for that.
It's interesting, too, though. I think a lot of people overlook the role of a location manager in commercials and don't maybe give them the credit they deserve. I've done commercial work as well. Obviously, most location managers have. There are some that specialize in doing nothing but commercials. And it's a similar but slightly different skill set. You kind of take on some additional responsibilities that you would normally pass on a film. Did you prefer doing commercials or did you think you would prefer going back to commercials, or did you always feel like once you made the jump that was where you should be in the feature world?
Well, I have to say that I have this passion for beautiful old and new cars, so I've always enjoyed scouting, and I think my passion always will lie. My first and foremost passion will be with scouting, because the scouting really did take me to places that a military education might give me, where you scout various cities, countries, in regions where I may never have been to. But on the same note, through those travels, through being able to document that journey through photographs, helped establish me now as a scout that could travel to foreign places. I mean, doing a lot of car commercial scouting exposed me to scouting in foreign countries that have a lot of car culture, such as, Modena, where they make the Ferrari,
Oh, yeah.
And Lamborghini, and, Milan, and, where they have Pininfarina design. It's like, those are the essence of what I feel car culture has exposed to the world. Like you go to Monte Carlo, you understand that it's like open IndyCar racing. You go open wheel kart tracking, you could do it Indy 500, you could do Daytona, Homestead Speedway. But through that journey, if you will, of scouting, I did realize that to keep me competitive with everybody else out there, I needed to balance both scouting and managing. However, my passion still lies with going out on the open road, finding this desolate, dusty road, or finding that, compression of power lines, like on that movie Seven, where you see all the poles kind of just stacked up on each other.
Yeah.
All those visual elements have shaped what I am today. And I have a great reverence and passion for it. So listen, if somebody were to tell me, I'm sorry, your job is no longer needed, but we'll need you to scout for the next 5 years and only pay you half of your rate, but you'll get a job for 5 years, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I started off not liking scouting as much, and I realized later it was because I didn't really understand the job. Once I really took the time and got more invested, I mean, as much as I like taking the pretty pictures and all of that, I didn't understand the needs of the director enough. And I think it was a failure of communication on both ends, but I could have asked more questions to better prepare me for it. And I probably would have felt a lot more successful my first time out. Now I love scouting, and I think I'm a pretty darn good scout.
That's great.
And finding, that whole collaboration that you have, the ability to maybe give them an idea they didn't have when they wrote the scene.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'm sure you've had that experience many times where they send you out looking for a white house and you bring them a green one, and they fall in love with why you brought them the green one.
Yep.
And suddenly it becomes, why didn't we think of that?
There was one which came later in my career, when I was actually working on a Captain America movie, Captain America Winter Soldier. And we were shooting in nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and there was discussions about how we would open the movie and how we can, put this new icon in a different light, meaning Captain America. Mm-hmm. And originally they said, we've seen it all. We've seen the opening shots above mall, above the tidal basin, above all these things. We're looking for something different. And I turned to the creative producer at Marvel, and I said, I think I got an idea. He's like, really, what? And I said, it's better if I show you. So can you give me 2 days? He's like, yeah, we're going to shoot this in 5 days. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute. So you want me to pull the permit in 5 days, even though we don't know creatively what it is? He's like, yeah, come on. You did it before. And I'm like, shoot.
What have I done?
Yeah, what have I kind of staying with the late night, early morning? Tell you what, I'll go out, put my tripod up, see what I can get. So I set up my tripod, and not to go, talk a long story longer, but basically framed and composed a shot where I would run through frame, but I would have the shutter open a little bit longer. So I mostly shot prints, and then I shot a QuickTime video to show them what I was thinking. And it basically integrated the speed of the new Captain America against the character of his friend, which was Falcon, mm-hmm. played by Anthony Mackie. So when I would run by at full pace, which of course is exponentially slower than any human being because I'm not very athletic, it looked like I was running like Shazam, like super fast. So then they said, well, dude, what is that? I said, it was just slow shutter speed, but I shot it at sunrise, 10 minutes before sunrise. So you get that great hue glow in the background. They're like, you didn't put it through Photoshop? I'm like, no, that's just the light that's kicking off, the atmosphere. He's like, dude, that's a shot. So unbeknownst to me, it backed us into only able to shoot this portion by the tidal basin between 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after, which was perfect because I knew that was the only time National Park Service would be able to give us that permit.
Right.
So unconsciously, I wanted to frame it like I'll have to shoot every conceptual shot, every option as a beauty shot. And I have to do it over the next 3 days. So I shoot a beauty sunset shot and a beauty sunrise shot. And they'll say, which one? And I'll say, it's got to be one of these. They typically don't allow filming during normal day hours because the Lincoln Memorial was being renovated, and the memorial that we were looking at was the Jefferson Memorial. And oddly enough, I didn't realize this until National Park told me, is that Jefferson Memorial is the only memorial that National Park Service has armed security there because it has a direct line of sight to the White House.
Oh,
and you can actually see from the White House, I forget which president, but it is documented, removed 2 trees that is on the eclipse. So on the, I guess it'll be the south side of the White House, so that they could see the building of the Jefferson Memorial. So if you stand at the Jefferson Memorial and look towards the White House, you can actually see the White House unobstructed. And hence that's why they have 2 armed security forces there. So to tie into that opening sequence of Captain America Winter Soldier, I think my best and greatest find to ever make it into the movie was the opening sequence prior to the jogging sequence in DC, which was Captain America jumping out of a Quinjet, which was CGI, and he dove through the air into the ocean to a ship that was docked. Well, this ship, by sheer coincidence, my son and I were taking a drive in Long Beach, and off in the distance, he saw this odd-looking ship, which ended up being something called the Sea Launch. Now, if you know a little bit about naval history for global satellites and whatnot, I didn't realize this. The Sea Launch was a oil platform that was repurposed to launch communication satellites from the ocean.
No, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, if you Google it, it's docked in Long Beach now, and they formed a partnership with Boeing, and it was like 20% Russian, 40% Boeing, the rest 40% tied amongst other satellite vendors. And they had launched satellites from the equator when they would tow this ship, which was a platform, and they would launch satellites into space. So on a whim, I went there. I don't even know what I said to them. I'm like, yeah, I'm scouting for a movie. And they're like, really, what movie? And then I was educated enough to know that certain characters really open doors. Sure. And when I said Captain America, oh my God, it was like rolling out the red carpet. So after convincing certain executives at that company that this could be a huge boost, if you will, to Sea Launch and their public appearance, what they do, they said that they would love to embark on this relationship with us. So I scouted the ship. There's 2 ships. One is the control ship, which was about a 12 or 14 story ship. And then there was the launch platform. And I scouted both of them while at the dock and brought the pictures in. And I was thankful that I didn't waste my time, but they said, what is this? And I said, you guys wanted something different. Nobody has shot on this ship except for high fashion, like Vogue or Vanity Fair would shoot on their helipad, but they never thought to shoot actually on the ship. And that's where one of the iconic shots, which is Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, rappelled down through a tiny opening from top of the deck down into the engine room. That was all shot on Sea Launch. And the computer graphics of comping together the ship and the launch platform was done via VisFX. But the whole ship, in terms of, the hostages, the mess hall, the deck where you see Captain America fight with Lefranc, the French bad guy, who's an MMA fighter. It's all done practically on the ship, and that was definitely, I think, one of my biggest and best accomplishments, because I had to get everyone on the crew to take a 2.5-hour safety on the waters seminar. And let me tell you, it was like pulling teeth. Production was like, no way, who's going to pay for this? And I said, well, you guys wanted something totally unique. I mean, at the end, it cost us maybe $1.5 million, but the sheer production value on screen is
well, and I love that story because you found it with your son. When I'm out with my wife sometimes and all of a sudden something catches my eye and I just put the blinker on and she knows where we were going and the way I'm turning is not in that direction. She just looks at me and goes, we're scouting, aren't we? I said, yeah, just real quick. I need to see what's over here. And I found some great locations that way. So I especially love that you found it just out and about with your son one day.
Yep, those are the best finds.
You've worked on so many movies we could talk about, and we have a limited amount of time, but I was curious. I noticed you worked on Twilight, and I have some family members, huge Twilight fans when the books were first out, and then, of course, they were going to make a movie. They were crazy about it. And I think their only complaint was that some of the locations didn't match the locations as they were described in the book. And obviously that's not necessarily the onus of the location manager. A lot of that falls to the production designer.
Right.
But the house is like totally different than the house, which is such an anchor of those books from what was shown in the movie. I just had to ask the question if that was a discussion that was had, or what is your feeling when something like that happens? Or were you even aware there was a disparity between the two locations?
Well, I must say, when we were doing Twilight, first and foremost, I didn't realize that there was such a fan base, if you will. And it didn't really dawn on me until we were scouting the Pacific Northwest, Portland in specific, that the base was going to follow us no matter where we were.
Sure.
We did scout the falls, kind of where the whole movie was supposed to take place. But due to the fact that it was a 4-hour drive from Portland or Clackamas Falls or any other large city, immediately the studio said, we're not shooting there. There's absolutely no way we can shoot there and be productive in establishing our shoot days, making our days. I mean, when we were there scouting, by sheer chance, myself and the production designer were there the only day that it did not rain or snow. And literally when we got in the car and started driving away, it started snowing. So we were quick to make a decision that we had to be somewhere else, closer to a city, but still within, quote unquote, the zone. So Catherine Hardwick, who used to be a production designer, she did Vanilla Sky and, Out of Sight and a couple other movies. She said, look, I know we have to be close to our stage, but we don't have a stage. You find a stage that's close to our location and we'll figure it out. So for that movie, we were really lucky. I mean, the falls, Multnomah Falls, the inn, which was the last scene in the movie where they have the prom, all those locations we shot practically within 30, 35 minutes of Portland. And when we realized that if we really kind of toe the line between what's the book reality and what's the physicality of getting a production there, we then just had to make a decision between the design as well as the feasibility of getting the work done. Sure. So there was a slight deviation from the book, but as Catherine spoke about it, she said, look, when we put it together in the editing room, hopefully it'll be a lot more seamless than what it appears now.
I was, in looking at, I just had to ask that because I know I was talking to Ilt Jones, who worked, 8 or 9 seasons on the X-Files, something ridiculous. And he was talking about the fan base. and how he was in the middle of the woods one night, and somebody said hello, and he realized there was a group of people sitting around the woods that had been following them around because of the cult following the X-Files had in the day. And they knew his name. They had a file on him, and they had him sign autographs. What was it like dealing with the fan base for something like Twilight?
It was the first time that I've ever been exposed to tweenies, if you will, and as well as the tweenies' mothers.
Yeah.
It really dawned on me that we were working on something much bigger than what we thought when we were shooting in Angeles Crest Forest. And to get to Angeles Crest Forest, there's like two ways in. You got to take Angeles Crest Highway. It's an hour drive from LA. And when we got there, somebody from the crew obviously leaked it, but there were 4 teenage girls and one, she might have been 19. So I guess she was the adult, all waiting on the roadside. Now, it'd be one thing if they were in their car.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any car anywhere. And I asked them, "Are you guys okay? What's going on?" They said, "No, we heard that you guys are filming." And I said, "Filming what?" Just trying to make sure, like, who are these people? They're not wackos. Said, "Oh, well, we found out through some blogs and whatnot that you guys are filming Twilight." And I'm like, "Interesting. Okay, well, do me a favor. Just stand over there a little bit off the distance because I've got a bunch of trucks." And it kind of started to make sense. Like, these people are fanatics. So, I wasn't really taken aback from it. I just had to be conscious of there are the general public that are out. The fact that it was 9 p.m. and we're shooting nights. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, "Well, who's going to come and get you guys?" They said, "Oh, our parents are going to come, or my parents going to come probably around like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning." And I'm like, "Well, who's your guardian?"
Yeah, who's
And they all pointed to this girl. And I said, "How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 19. And I'm like, this is bad. When Catherine Hardwicke, our director, heard about this, she, of course, said, "Oh, my God, let's bring the fans over." So they, of course, got a photo op. She said she talked to the transpo guy, always, keep a spare, banger around. So we put them in the 2-banger so they wouldn't be cold because, one, Catherine Hardwicke knew that this movie was going to live and die by the fans tweeting, by the fans telling other people on Friday night, got to go see it. And I'm telling you, when I had never been part of this swell of enthusiasm because when the premiere was happening, she invited the production designer, set decorator, location manager, which was me, and the DP to go in her limo with her. And we're like, no, that's you. She's like, no, this is a group effort. I want you to see how crazy it is. And, she had told us about this when she would go to meetings with Stephanie Meyer and how people would like ask for autographs. And I was always like, come on, that's just BS. Yeah. Well, because I live in Venice and the director, Catherine Hardwicke, also lived in Venice, I got picked up in addition to the set decorator who also lived in Venice. And by the time we got to Westwood and we stepped out of the limo, it was ridiculous. There were so many fans, mind you, most of them under the age of 19, most of them over the age of 12, but there were like girls who were fans of Edward. There were some tweeny boys who were fans of, all the various ladies, Bella, all them in the book. And I was like, this is rock star mentality craziness. Yeah. So only at that time did I realize it was bigger than what I thought it was, because honestly, when we were shooting it in Portland, not that many people knew, because that was the first book of Twilight. Yes, there were people who read the book, but I don't think people really thought, oh, they're going to make this movie. So then when it's making the local paper, and when we shot the high school scene up in Clackamas, and we started getting, the fans, then I was like, oh, geez, I better get some police barricades. I better get the tennis screens. I better get all the other stuff. And it was interesting. It didn't shape my life like our fellow rock star, Ilk Jones, who's done all the major big movies. But for me, I was impressed. I was working on something that was well received by the public. So
it is. So you made quite a jump from there. You ended up in the Marvel world, or the superhero and the summer blockbuster world, for pretty much the next 10 years. Starting off with Captain America, First Avenger, Captain America, then into the big one with Infinity War and Endgame, and then moving on to Spider-Man and Wonder Woman. Describe that transition, simply because there's no way to talk about all these projects, but I mean, that's a vast leap above even a project that was as well received as something like Twilight.
Absolutely. I mean, I often thank the good graces of the man above for getting a lot of great opportunities. I think that just my work ethic, as well as trying to demonstrate to the studio over the years that I'm cost conscious, as well as production friendly, while at the same time being production designer friendly, because you want to make sure that the people who you're going to work with on a close basis are happy with your work. So getting the opportunity to do kind of what we spoke about a little bit earlier, international travel, scouting on things like Fast and the Furious 5, which took me around the world, took me to South America, helped open the door to other directors who, not to too much insight, but the director of Fast and the Furious 5, James Lin, no relation, is business partners with the directors of Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame. That's the Russo brothers. And they have a partnership in a commercial production company that I've done a lot of work for as a commercial scout, and that company is Bullet. So ironically, I think when directors realize that you can bring something to the table that potentially some of their past hires have not been able to, they are super keen and super smart to recognize that and say, we really want to keep this person in our stable to help elevate our project after project after project. So when I went from Fast and Furious 5 to the second and the third Captain Americas, each one, the thought was, well, there's no way this is going to be better than the last. And when box office numbers came out, there was this onus to, we got to raise the level. So by having that expectation hovering above, I was then oftentimes given a little bit more freedom to say, where can we shoot these various scenes in this script that you've given me? And having the input from the creatives at the various studios balanced with the physical production aspect, we oftentimes had the world as our oyster, and we could almost scout anywhere. It became a balance of the creative side mixed with the production side.
Right.
So, when the different studios said, where can we elevate the expectation of this movie? And they would then talk about international travel. That then expanded the palette, if you will, of where I can bring the moviegoer to and help shape their interpretation of what this character can then develop into. So obviously always taking guidance from the studio as well as the designer and the directors, I then was able to give multiple options that would present both being production friendly as well as design friendly. And going to those regions such as Germany, Prague, Czechoslovakia, Budapest, and then expanding it on the last two Avengers movies, biggest box office, which is still amazing to me. And being able to go and scout places like Lençois in South America, Brazil, sand dunes, scouting places in the Philippines and Iceland, Scotland, really helped shape more of my skill set that potential employers would say, this is a person that we really would like to have on our project. And, then going back from that amazing ride to things like my really biggest movie before I hung my hat up on that was Wonder Woman 84, where it was more logistical and political relationships that I had to make sure were in good standings, both with the local location managers as well as the agencies that handled the jurisdictions for permitting there. So it was a fine, balanced dance between a lot of those.
Yeah.
And it was great. Each project brought new skill sets that I now still incorporate in my day-to-day work, and they have been great experiences that I would trade nothing for. So,
and I know we are getting to where we want to wrap soon, but I wanted to ask, just to give people an idea, you sit down for your first creative meeting, they want you to go start scouting for Captain America or one of these major projects where you could go anywhere. What's the conversation? Explain what that's like for people that haven't sat in those types of meetings, as far as, well, I guess you need to book me a ticket to go here because I think this, how does that develop? What's the evolution of the scouting process when you've got a project like that?
Well, each project is obviously different, and fortunately, working closely with the Marvel universe, if you will, you quickly learned what the appetite wants to be and what the appetite ultimately will land on. Discussions often are, where can we do this movie with the least amount of company moves?
Of course.
And with that being said, we often say, well, that all applies when you can do one look for a movie in one region. And that's when the kind of screws and pressure comes from production, where they say, well, you're going to have to find one geographical area that can play for 5 or 6 locations. We do that all the time, as
Sure.
you and I both know. So when we started to realize what is going to drive this end, if you will, is it going to be the creatives? Is it going to be the finance? Is it going to be the production? And oftentimes it is a very well balanced symbiosis between all three. And it's a journey just to get there, because obviously as filmmakers, we always want to raise the level to be better than the last one, to show that we can deliver a project that has never been seen before. But on the same note, we know that we have to move the box because we only have X amount of dollars to spend. So when I usually sit down with the director after they've given me the script, I'll read it, I'll give them some broad stroke notes, and then they will come back and say, well, these are our notes. And oftentimes those notes are much grander than my notes. So then I have to take my notes and sit with the studio to say, hey, I just had a meeting with X, Y, and Z, and they would like to examine these 3 countries, at which point usually the production exec, like, eyeballs are popping out saying, we're not going to 3 countries. And then oftentimes I will say, well, it's kind of out of my pay grade for me to go tell the director that we're not going. So then that production exec will, do their due diligence and explain to the filmmakers why we need to keep it to one country. So it's a lot of horse trading. It's a lot of, listen, we want 5 places. They say we'll go to 3. They'll land at 4. And then we'll go to a bunch of other small places with a plate unit. Yeah. So it oftentimes takes we're going to digest this for a couple of days, see what it is, land on it. But oftentimes, like with every project and every studio, I will break it down in my location breakdown to to say, here are certain sets that we're going to be in there for more than 4 to 8 pages. I think we should build this because there's going to be a lot of stunts.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of special effects, and when they say, what about these outdoor locations? And I'll say, well, make sure that we scout it and shoot it not during the rainy season or the monsoon season. So I try to bring to the table as much back knowledge in terms of geographical location, atmospheric conditions, topography, access to the location. I try to let them know when we go to a city what special events are being planned for that time. And this was a case in point where we were shooting in a city that had to be hosting Super Bowl for the following year. And I mentioned to them, hey guys, just to let you know, this city's going to host the Super Bowl. They're like, yeah, we won't be here. We'll be long gone. I'm like, okay, let me just email. I send an email. I CC all the important people. Everybody's saying, oh, don't worry, we won't be here.
Oh, yeah.
And then 2 weeks before, they're like, hey, can we get access to that road? I'm like, did you not read this email that I've been sending out the past year? Oh, the Super Bowl. They got way more money than we do. So that's no. But, you work it out. Right. It all comes together at the end.
Well, and you're in the unique position that you've had the opportunity to work with them before, so you know how to manage their expectations. But in spite of that, is there a unique set of challenges when you begin scouting for a project like this?
What was tough and challenging was sometimes when you film in, I won't say overly shot, but areas that have seen a lot of filming over the past couple of years.
Sure.
Sometimes the locations, if not a lot, are recycled. And you have to be very creative in terms of how you portray a certain location, either from a perspective, from the time of day, from the choice of lens selection. Possibly you're showing something like style shots, may not be the whole building, but maybe interior pieces, textures, surfaces, tile, stainless steel, diamond plate, more glass, less carpet, more marble. All those contributing characteristics helping patient scout / manager tell their story that, oh yeah, you may have seen this in the past 15 movies, but you haven't seen this.
Right.
And they'll say, where is it? And you then say, oh, it's down this hall, down the corridor, up this staircase, And sometimes it's really the only way to continue some excitement, if you will, with shooting in various towns and states that have just seen a lot of filming, and just pushes the envelope, I think, for all of us to try to be as creative as possible in delivering our message of, we are all specialists, location scouts and managers. Location scouts to help deliver that little seed, and managers helping deliver that seed into a full-grown plant so that we can all harvest and utilize for this movie process. But I think it's a group effort. I think that the LMGI, kind of circling back to LMGI, the coffee box, the additional courses that teach budgeting, teach location scouting, are all hugely beneficial for the membership, where you can raise awareness of, God, why am I not getting more gigs to go and scout? Well, find out what your other scouts do and see if you can emulate it, and then maybe start to integrate your own specific spin, your own take on it, so that you can then be distinguished from them to say, oh, this person's amazing. And that's what I did. As you said, plagiarism is the best form of compliment, but oftentimes when you start to realize, how can I make my skill better and incorporate those little tweaks from other people to kind of make it unique, you then are able to make a great niche for yourself, where people are like, oh, you need to call you need to call like Lori Bolton, the scout. You need to call, oh God, I forgot the gentleman's name. He's been around forever. Dal Griffith.
Oh, Dal Griffith.
Called Dal. Yeah. You need to get a manager who can deal with, mob, the mafia, the BLM. Call Mike Fantasia. Mike has got some amazing negotiating skills, and I have to say that I feel very fortunate to be lumped together with yourself, the Mike Fantasias, the Il Jones, the Janice Pollys, all of them that have shown time and time again through projects of conflict, projects of just wear and tear, that at the end of the day we can float to the top. We will be able to bring our best foot forward. So why location scouting as well as location managing is a great profession to be in.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is interesting when you have other scouts working with you and you tell them what you're looking for, and they immediately, the first thing they think of, what about this location? And you're like, yeah, that's great, but what else is there? What else have we not shown them? Let's bring something new to the table that's not the default that everyone's expecting.
Right.
So, well, we've hinted at it a couple of times. Why don't we take time now before we wrap to talk about your new role? Obviously, we've mentioned that you're still involved in scouting, but it is not your primary function. Tell people a little bit more about your new role at Universal Pictures, or relatively new role.
Sure. So I've taken recently a position at Universal Studios, partly due to being on the road for over 20 years, also having a child that is entering high school. Mm-hmm. I realized that I did not want to miss out on an opportunity to physically be here for my child as he grows up. So I made a decision to go in-house, partly because I received my 20-year commitment pin from the Teamsters. So I was like, wow, this is almost fortuitous. Just because as much as I love location scouting and managing, I also wanted to make sure that if I was going to be a contributing voice to present day production as well, potentially change in the future, I needed to do it from the studio perspective. So I've been in communications with one other studio prior to coming into Universal, and was very, very fortunate to be offered a staff position as vice president of physical production. So presently I've been at Universal for about a year and 4 months, and basically am the vice president executive in charge of certain projects at Universal that are determined by the president, because the president has an EVP, 2 SVPs, and 1 VP. So I'm definitely the junior guy on the block, which is fine with me, because I look at it as a really great learning experience and opportunity to have a fellow person who's come through the ranks, who's been in the trenches, if you will, that can obviously help voice and possibly structure future discussions on where our membership is at now and where it potentially can go in the future years.
Take a second, if you don't mind, to kind of detail what the role of somebody in physical production is.
The VP of physical production basically is in charge of working closely with the creative executive at the studio, where we'll get a script, we'll break it down, we'll then come up with budgets for various cities, both locally, nationally, and internationally, where we could do the movie. And then we determine who would be a great director for it. And then in terms of my job then to sift through the support staff after the creatives have hired a director, and I then in charge of brokering the deals with the various agents for DPs, production designers, line producers,
right.
costume designers, and then everybody else subsequently working with them, such as the heads of department where I used to work as a location manager. Those positions are negotiated by the line producer through the production manager. So then through the process, I will go on tech scouts. I will go on various midway segue points of a production to make sure things are going smoothly. If they are not going as smoothly, I of course will have to come to set more often than not, just to make sure that there's definitely a clear idea of what needs to get done, that we need to make the day. If there's certain concerns about creatively what has to happen, then I'll get the creative exec involved. But my job mostly as a physical production exec is to get everything behind the camera
right.
prepped and ready for the actors in front of the camera.
Well, obviously, given what I know of you and your background and what you've done, I have no doubt you're going to be incredibly successful and probably already making a mark. Both.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Well, we would do a disservice to everyone if we didn't talk about the current situation we're dealing with. Obviously, we've been in the midst of a lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are all preparing and trying to figure out how we go back to work safely. And you may, without creating a whole nother hour-long interview, which we certainly don't want to do, give me what's your perspective, both from the production side and the location side, of how we do this? What's the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch, okay. Well, I definitely feel, as do a lot of my colleagues, that testing is going to be a key element to getting all of our brothers and sisters back to work, to having a safe environment in which they feel that proper PPE is being used, that proper sterilization techniques and procedures are being implemented, be it germicidal mist, be it ultraviolet rays. There's so many various options that are being discussed right now through not just our studio, but other studios, where they want to make sure that the work environment is a safe environment. And to do so, we obviously need to test, and test some more. And the reason is until crew members feel comfortable working in such close proximity with their fellow crew members, is that it's going to be difficult to ensure that unless you can clearly show with a high percentage of test results that people don't have COVID-19 and it is a safe environment to work with. In terms of your following questions, in terms of what location managers can prepare for in the future, there's a couple of various points of views right now. Some feel that working in a stage is going to be really great and controllable, while there are others that feel working on location might be better. I won't get my personal opinions involved in it right now. You will have to kind of take a moment of caution and reference from the various other guilds and unions
Sure.
that want to make sure that they don't rush into it. For instance, one of our fellow membership unions, SAG-AFTRA, is obviously very concerned that their membership will be obviously the most impacted by the policies and procedures that are being suggested through the AMPT's white pages, through various other studios' policies and procedures. Now, in the end, I think a lot of crew members will say, I'll do it once a vaccine comes out. But as we've heard through various medical professions, and I am definitely not one of them, is that vaccine will probably not come out until next year. So there's definitely an opportunity, I think, for location managers and membership to find potential opportunities to work within the system to help deliver the message of we're going to be working in a safe environment. I've heard various opinions from other members saying, maybe you could start a company that, just focuses on COVID-19 cleaning techniques. Maybe, we can start a company that has, ultraviolet ray robots, that are going to sterilize. There's a lot of great innovative ideas that are coming out through memberships, and I applaud all of them and say, keep bringing on those ideas, because, there is no better profession than ours that can solve a problem that through the general public, they would think as impossible. But us as filmmakers, location managers, fellow crew members, that is our job every day, is to deliver the impossible. So I think, obviously being as patient as we can, obviously keeping up the communication lines between, other location managers, checking in with them, seeing what they have heard. I'm happy to take emails from, a lot of the membership if they want, when they say, hey, what have you heard? I will definitely share what I can without jeopardizing what I can and cannot share due to conflict of interest. But I can tell you that I am presently boarding and budgeting quite a few projects that we're looking at a Q4 start, like fourth quarter start. Yeah. So it's coming back. It's definitely not going to come back immediately, but I can tell you it's going to come back like gangbusters when it does. Because as we all know, as the membership probably knows as well, is that when we get the green light from Governor Newsom, Mayor Garcetti, in terms of rolling in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, there's going to be all these productions that were either mid-shooting prior to the COVID-19 crisis or prepping to shoot within a week or two prior to the COVID-19 crisis. And all those projects, in addition to the supply chain of delivering product to the various studios, the SVODs, the PVODs, it's there. It's coming. That means we need to fill it with the various membership roles of location managers, location scouts, to fill those positions, not as quickly as possible, but the tide is coming. The tide is definitely coming, where all of those projects are going to be knocking on your door very shortly. And mind you, in my opinion, there's going to be a shortage of qualified location scouts and managers that can help deliver that. So it's going to be a great opportunity for assistants who have wanted a shot to kind of move up, to kind of demonstrate to the production managers and producers out there to say, hey, here I am, I'm ready, right, and give me a shot and I won't let you down.
And we're dealing with much the same thing on the East Coast that you're dealing with out there, with productions that were in the midst of production that were shut down and trying to figure out how to go back to work, with productions that were gearing up to start filming, with ones that were just calendared and don't know what to do yet. So it'll be interesting to see, especially when 60 days ago things were different than they are now. And we don't know what it'll look like 60 days forward. Well, I also wanted to ask you to comment on the technology for location scouts. The tools we use are changing, and you've got a vast amount of experience under your belt on some major projects. Tell me what your thoughts are on some of the tools and changes that are coming in the way we approach our jobs and the things we use to accomplish our jobs from photography on.
I think that every project definitely has opportunities for 3D and virtual scouting. Depending on the project, there will still be creative directors out there who say, no, I want to see it in person. But as we see more and more projects that integrate technology in their design as well as presentation, such as, Mandalorian, such as, these other projects that take place in space. I think having the tech there to support it is a great opportunity. Having the tech there to have, let's say, your production designer and your director to go into a virtual world so that they can walk through the space and see it before it's physically built is a great tool to have, because potentially it might save you some money. Now, on that same note, it is probably initially going to cost a little more money, because you then will have these bubbles, if you will, where, a VR setup's got to be set up with the production designer, VR setup's got to be set up with the producer, and a VR setup's got to be set up with the studio, so that they can all see what they're seeing, so that they are all up to speed with the technological innovations that are being introduced. In terms of the virtual scouting, where you'll have scouts go out, maybe shoot what we call a photosphere. I'm sure you're aware of it, where you're shooting 360-degree pans. It's not that different than location scouting as it is now. The only difference is that you're going to have to data manage a lot more stuff. You're going to have the bandwidth to be able to transmit all this information quickly and efficiently, because, we're not here to LiDAR, or VFX counterparts are, as a location person, to just LiDAR the whole area. We realize that is just way too time consuming initially. As techniques start to evolve and things are streamlined and become more efficient, I would say that would definitely have to be a skill set that you would have to integrate in your toolbox. But presently, if you were to shoot a 360-degree pan, shoot it in as wide angle as possible, shoot at high res, and then you give an opportunity for VFX to build that out. If you're just going to hand that off to them and they do it, technically you're still driving creative where the shot's going to be. If you go out, let's say, to the desert and they say, no, you need to move to the left, you need to move to the right. If you have the wherewithal to place your subject matter, your car, whatever it is, out in the location and photograph accordingly, people are then going to be drawn to, let's base our judgments, our critiques of it on this static symbol that's already there. Because if you just start having a blank canvas, then it's going to be tough for location scouts and managers to maintain that same level of importance when VFX starts saying, oh, we'll just do it digitally. We'll just do it. Well, you can do that when you still work integrally with the location scout and manager. You still got to get there. Yeah. You still got to know where to start from. What happens if you say, oh, I'm just going to scout here off the left, off to the road, and then next thing you know, you've gone to a jurisdiction or a township that isn't permitted, and you create huge ripple in the local, dichotomy of what's being accepted and what's not. So I definitely see that location scouts as well as managers will continue to have a job in the future. You just need to make sure that you're able to integrate certain skills that are being asked for by other departments. And how you disseminate that information is your own judgment. The more you disseminate, my opinion is the less involved you may have to get in the end. But it also, on the same note, when I give more information to the technical professionals out there and they realize, oh, this, whoever it may be, is able to give me a bunch of metadata, and, they're so pro, VFX, we want to work with them more often. So a lot of times, if you're able to do that, you can then expand on your duties from just location scout on the movie to location scout and manager on the plate units. That way you can bridge the gap between our present day skill set and potentially what the skill sets will require from us in the future.
Absolutely. Well, James, I can't thank you enough for making so much time available to chat. I think there's a lot of great information in here that people working in the locations industry will be interested in, as well as for people just interested in how the film industry works as a whole. So thanks again for joining us to talk on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Dodd.
It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
That'd be great. And if you have time, come by the studio. We'll go have lunch.
Absolutely. And you stay safe out there, too, okay?
All right. Take care. Bye.
And thank you again for joining us on the back channel where the work gets done on set, Locations on 2. This podcast is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. You can find out more about the LMGI by visiting them online at locationmanagers.org. My name is Dodd Vickers, and you can find me online at doddvickers.com. To subscribe to this podcast and find additional episodes, look anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud. It's there. Until next time, back to one.